Okay, so the Sony ZV-E1, the camera that's been with me personally for the last year and a half, the camera that's filming this exact video you're watching right now. I've done everything with this camera. I've taken videos, I've taken photos, I've done client work, and I've taken it all around the world with me on my travels filming personal content. We're gonna talk about all those categories and how it stacks up as an overall content machine going into 2026. We're gonna talk about also the things I like and I don't like as much about this camera, and whether or not I think it's still a worthwhile investment now that it's going on 3 years since this camera's released. So with that all being said, let's talk about it. Okay, so the Sony ZV-E1 for video. And when this camera was released, and it still is advertised as a video camera, so I'm not gonna ramble too much about specs just because you can find out all over the internet. But needless to say, this camera is incredible for video, and I've had no complaints about it pretty much whatsoever. It has 10-bit 422 color, which means that the dynamic range is incredible. You can do so much with the color grading with your footage in post-production to get the desired look that you want. And one thing that this camera initially really had that honestly wasn't even available on other Sony cameras but has since been released through firmware updates is the stabilization. And what I mean by that is that there's multiple modes on this camera. There's the dynamic active, there's active stabilization, there's standard. And if you go all the way out to the dynamic active, it sometimes just feels like you're using a gimbal without even having to use one. So that's just been an amazing thing on this camera specifically that I've really liked about it. The autofocus is incredible as well. I've never really had to worry about it not getting focused or not catching whatever I want it to be in focus since using this. And last thing is probably the major selling point of this camera is the low light performance, since it has the same sensor as the FX3 and the A7S III, which have been pretty much the top of the line prosumer cameras for the past 4 or 5 years or so now. And it still blows my mind what you can do with a 12,800 native ISO. And I actually don't even find myself in a lot of situations where I actually even need to use it, but the flexibility it allows me, where in a lot of scenarios, I can even just crank it up to 12,800 and just leave an ND filter on it and just adjust my ND filter to adjust my exposure. It gives me so much flexibility and ease when I'm out shooting. And the last reason why I personally can still categorize the Sony ZV-E1 as a serious video camera is because it has no record limit. While that may be a little counterintuitive with another issue that a lot of people have had with the Sony ZV-E1 that we'll talk about a little later, mostly in regards to the overheating, I still find that a no record limit is very nice to have, and it gives a lot of reassurance to anyone that wants to do serious video with this camera. Now, photography is a very interesting category for the Sony ZV-E1, since it is capable of taking photos, but that's not what it's been primarily advertised as. But in my personal opinion, I still find it very much possible to take very clean and beautiful images with this camera. Some of my favorite images over the past year and a half have actually been taken on this camera. And unless you're a very seasoned photographer and photography is a very huge emphasis on your work, I feel like the 12 megapixels doesn't actually affect how well of a photographer or how well of photos you take, as opposed to other aspects of photography, such as learning your settings, your composition, and lighting, and all those other things that don't relate to just the megapixel count of your camera. Now, do keep in mind that while I do also say that 12 megapixels does have its limitations at certain times. And the most noticeable one is that the mediums of which your photos are being shown. The photos taken on this camera, from my experience, have pretty much been limited to social media and been viewing on small screens such as your phone, tablets, and computers. And when you print them out, you're only really limited to printing photos to a standard A4 sheet of paper, which it still works, but also if you do any heavy cropping, then you'll really start to see the megapixel and the image quality kind of fall off. So that's a real limitation in terms of taking photos with this camera in particular. Okay, so now let's talk about what I love about this camera. And there's a lot. I actually switched from the A7S III to this camera. And the main reason is because of its pocketability and its small form factor, especially when traveling. This camera doesn't really come across, especially if you pair it with a small lens as a really pro level camera. even though it does pack pro level features, which I do really like. But on the flip side, if you do put on a little bit of a longer or heavier lens, it does tend to tip over pretty easily. So that's kind of a give or take depending on how you feel about that situation. So I personally also even have smaller hands, so I don't really even need a cage or additional grip for my hand to be able to fully grip the camera. So I still get that good tactile feel when I hold a smaller body like this. On top of that, one thing that I just love about not just this camera, but any Sony camera in general is the access to the E-mount system. I still believe in 2025 going into 2026 that the Sony E-mount system is the best mounting system for lenses, just because of all the third-party lenses that are available and all the different choices at different price ranges that you have. So that's definitely a luxury that I get on this one as well. All right, so now we're going to go into a few things that I don't like as much about this camera, and unfortunately there are a few of them. The first one being is that there's that rocker button that's right in front of the shutter. Personally, I don't really know why it's there, especially at that specific position, as I feel myself always kind of accidentally hitting it every now and then and me zooming in when I don't want it to. Personally, I haven't also found a way to turn it off, so if there is a way to do it, someone please let me know in the comment section. The next thing I don't really like is the screen, and because it's a smaller body, it is a smaller screen, but I just think the quality of the monitor isn't the best, so I'd love if there is a future iteration of this camera for that to be upgraded. That also kind of leads into my next point, just because if the screen isn't that good, usually on other bodies, I can rely on the viewfinder, but not for the ZV-E1. It doesn't come with the viewfinder. And I know that in order to keep a small form factor, you do have to kind of sacrifice on certain things, but I don't really feel like the viewfinder was one thing that should have been sacrificed. I feel like having a nice EVF is nice, just one, to be able to look into, especially if it's a sunny day and it's hard for you to see your screen really properly, or just even as a point of contact if you want, say for example, a better shooting experience or more stable footage. So that's one thing that I quite miss. The last thing is that it has a single SD card slot, which personally hasn't been a big issue for me. I don't think I've ever actually had any footage corrupt on me, but I will say there have been times where I finished recording a video and I'm very, very low on SD card storage. And on other bodies, such as the A7S III, you can set it to where once one SD card fills up, it automatically records to the next one. That is a nice luxury to have that this camera doesn't have. So I would say that's a minor con, but not a huge one. Okay, so overall, do I think that this camera is a good choice as a content creation camera going into 2026? And I would say yes, with some small caveats. The first one being is that because it's going on 3 years old now, there could potentially be an upgrade within the next year or two, say ZV-E1 Mark II or a ZV-E2. However, we do know that Sony's release timelines for the cameras is a bit inconsistent, as it took about 5 or 6 years, even maybe more, for the A7S III to come out after the A7S II. So because of that, I would advise actually getting this camera used, as I believe it's pretty easy to find a good secondhand one in the market now for around $1,500 to $1,700. I would say that is the good range. Now, who should this camera be for? I would say if this camera is made for someone who wants to step up to production value, maybe get into some serious video work, as well as take occasional photos on the side as well, I would still say this camera is a great choice. So with that all being said, let me know if you or anyone you know has the Sony ZV-E1 and what your experience has been about this. So with that being said, appreciate everyone that's made it to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching, and until the next one, take it easy.